Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'll be chairing this evening's panel. Joining me on the panel are Gail Anderson and Kira Penner. Our assessor today is Jennifer Martins, and our administrative personnel is Zachary Mohan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 3, 5, and 6 on our docket today. Mr. Mohan, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony. Okay, so I will amend our docket by saying we'll also be hearing items 2, 4,
Chair,
7, and 8. Pardon me?
Madam Chair, if I may interject here.
Okay.
Can we take a 10-minute break, please?
Sure.
Because those documents were supposed to be in order.
Okay.
I was having problems with my PDF, and someone was supposed to sign them on my behalf. So I need to speak to that individual.
Ms. Martins?
There was an email sent by Marcello Navarro. It was sent in at 4:43.
Hang on then. Let's take a look. Okay. Do you need enough time do you need a recess, Mr. Mohan? Okay. Okay. Okay, so then let's go back to our original. We'll be hearing 1, 3, 5, and 6, and Mr. Mohan will hear those ones. And then if you find anything that we need to do, we can adjust at the end. Okay? All right.
Jennifer Martins. I do.
Howard Lindsay McCubbin. Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, before we begin, Mr. McCubbin, I just need to confirm that the appeal with respect to this property is on value only? You're appealing the value, assessed value?
Yes, I am. I'm not.
Nope, that's okay. Just need to confirm the points of appeal.
Yes, are there other points of ticked off on the application? I don't have it right now.
No, it's
okay,
just,
yes, yeah.
It's just procedure for me to confirm the point of appeal.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So assessed value. Okay. Ms. Martins.
Okay. This is file number 24-2444. Roll number 0800240000. That is, the address is 291 St. Anne's Road. The assessed value is $7,453,000. The classification is 20 and the liability is T taxable. This is an apartment building. There is one building with 2 stories. It was built in 1970 and it has an effective year built of 1980. There are 51 suites and 52 outdoor parking spots. If you go to page number 3, please. We have 24 one-bedroom suites, 27 two-bedroom suites with 51 total. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,170.74, giving us a gross potential rent of $716,493. We've applied a 3.6 vacancy rate and a 44.97% expense rate, giving us a net operating income of $380,092. We've applied a capitalization rate of 5.1%, which gives us our estimated market value rounded at $7,453,000. We have some rental comparables and some cap rate evidence. And there is, on page 8, there's a building permit from 2015, which was for over $3 million. And we do have some advertisements and pictures of the property. And the income and expense information starts on page 14. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. McCubbin, do you have any questions for the assessor?
No, I don't, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Was this assessment all model driven?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And has there been an inspection of the property?
I don't know when the last inspection was. I didn't inspect it.
Okay. And the building permit that you referred to, is that on page 8?
Yes.
Okay. And you said $3 million. I think it's $375,000.
Oh, sorry. $375,000.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. And
thank you.
The date of the photographs of the apartment on page 10, 11, and 12. Do you have a date of those photographs or where they?
I believe they were taken off of the website.
Okay. Recently?
So those were advertisement photographs.
Okay. Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Penner, questions for the assessor? Yes? Okay, sure. Do you need a recess, Zach? Okay. We'll go into recess and then we will restart with questions from Ms. Penner.
Okay, Madam Chair, we're now live again.
Okay. I'd like to call our meeting back to order, and we were at the point where Ms. Penner has an opportunity to ask questions of the assessor. So, Ms. Penner?
Thank you. There are no questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think I have any questions either, Ms. Martins. Oh, I do actually. Are you aware that I know Ms. Anderson spoke to you about the pictures, and you indicated that they're from the website. Do all the suites kind of have the same type of finishes? Are you aware?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. McCubbin.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. 291 St. Anne's Road, file number 24-2444. The 2025 realty assessment of $7,453,000, and we are requesting 2025 realty assessment of $6,918,000. I won't go through the description of the property. The assessor has already done that. So I will go directly to the income approach on page 13 of my presentation. And you can see that we're disputing the assessor's market gross rents of $716,493. We're using $717,195, which is slightly higher. We're applying the same vacancy rate as the assessor, and for the purposes of this report, we are also disputing the assessor's expense allowance of $310,607. We're applying higher expense of $322,227. And that's actually based on the actual stabilized expenses of the subject property. And I should mention also the potential gross market rent that we're applying is also based on the actual stabilized income of the subject property. And that would go forward to all the properties within the on this docket, Madam Chair. Okay. That's sort of comment. In regards to the cap rate, we're disputing the assessor's cap rate of 5.1%. We're using a capitalization rate of 5.75%. And go further down. So with respect to the market value on page 15, the resulting market value as of April the 1st, 2023, after my brief discussion there and inputs with regards to the forma, the rounded value is $6,918,000. With respect to the income approach summary, you can see that on page 16. And if you look at the bottom of the bottom line, sorry, it's line 35, you can see the value there in the imputed capitalization rate with the net operating income above that. And on page 17, we have the repairs and maintenance information for subject property, and it shows the way we stabilized it. And on page 18, a reconciliation of value, we are, a summary rather, we respectfully request the Board of Revision reduce the 2025 realty assessment from $7,453,000 to $6,918,000, and that's my presentation. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Mr. McCubbin, before you finish, would you like to just review your cap rate study quickly?
Sure, Madam Chair. With respect to the cap rate, when you look at the age of this property, it's the original age is 1970. That can be found on page 2 of the report. And when you go to page 14, which is the blurb on the capitalization rate, we do have, I don't know if I did submit that. Yes, I do have an Altus apartment cap rate study in that. If you would like to get into the bowels of that study, we can. But with respect to your question,
yes, that was my question about the Altus cap rate study.
Okay, fair enough. So it's in there, but just we do have on page 14, you see the effective year built and our guidance with respect based on our study with respect to Altus 2025. Good location for properties, and you see the effective year built, and you see from 1970 and 1989. And this property is at the not at the threshold. Well, it's one of the thresholds of the start of that decade, or that 20-year period, I guess. And it ranges from 5.5 to 6.25. For this specific property, we've gone to 5.75 with respect to the capitalization rate. Just that band in there. And if you need any more explanation, we can get into the cap rate study in the which should be in the appendix. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Martins, questions for the applicant?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Penner, questions?
Yes, please. I'm just wondering if you have any information about the overall condition of the property. I see there hasn't been a lot of expenditure over the last few years, but we did see that 2015 permit for 375. So do you have any information about the overall condition?
Right. The only information I have with respect to the condition visually is what Ms. Martins has provided in her presentation. And it looked like the building is well managed, so you wouldn't expect it to deteriorate. It's on schedule, I guess, for R&M. So I think it's in good condition for its age. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. That was all for me.
Thank you, Ms. Penner. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. In regard to the cap rate that you are applying on page 14, you've got the table there that indicates for a building this age, the cap rate that Altus proposes starts at 5.5. And I'm just wondering, when you describe the building as good condition, I'm wondering why you're selecting 5.75. Why you're proposing.
Right, that's a good question. And in good condition, you would typically go to 5.5, right? I would look at that in the middle of the, maybe a 1980s building. But this is an older building. This is at the start of that 20-year period. So it is, so to compensate for its age, I've gone 25 basis points up from the low end of 5.5.
Okay, despite it having an effective year built of 1980.
Of 1970.
It was built in 1970, but the
Yes.
effective year built is 1980.
I may stand corrected. Just bear with me, please. Well, in my presentation, it's 1970.
Right. That's when
Yes.
it was built.
Yeah.
But the assessment records from the assessment branch reflects that the effective year is 1980.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's not my evidence. I guess we can ask the assessor that, but it's my, there's nothing structurally that changed with this property. It's just being maintained well. So I'm not sure why that age went up. And also, how was that age calculated? I think it's probably tantamount, and anyways, I don't think it's probably calculated appropriately in terms of getting an effective age. But things like that are usually done when they're add-ons to a building, or if there's structural components that are totally. So We're going with 1970.
Okay. Okay. And also the expense rate. Yeah, I've got that. Okay. That was all my questions. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. Mr. McCubbin, you spoke about the age and you're using an effective age of 1970. So in your opinion, then the age alone resulted in a 0.25 increase to your cap rate from that base of 5.5?
It is, this is a judgment call, no doubt, right? I mean, it's not an exact science here, and I feel that this is a building built in 1970, right? When you have that span of age grouping there, and you have the cap rate starting at, sorry, I have to get to the page. Starting at 5.5, 6.25. I think, I'll leave it up to the board, that's a good point. I've gone up 25 basis points from the lower end. One could I really don't want to get into any, with respect to the age, the building type, construction, these type of adjustments, which are sometimes mentally done, street mix and stuff like that to justify the extra 25 basis point. I'll leave it up to the board to decide, Madam Chair.
Okay, then I just have one more question. This is more than a policy question for Altus, Altus. Is it Altus's practice then to use the effective age or the actual year built when it is determining in which tranche the cap rate you would find the appropriate cap rate?
Right. We always have a problem with that, Madam Chair. We've had discussions in regard to that exact topic. And it always comes back to maybe there's an adjustment needed if something was added on to the property, or if something, deteriorated, something substantial within the property, but just to update the property, especially when it's a 1970 and not say a 1912 building or something like that you really fix up and bring it up. So I mean, it's not going to be far off. So why even adjust it? And we also it's almost like throwing darts at a dartboard. What number do you come at? But there's a method of calculating effective age, but I don't believe the city does it. And that's the problem we have. So we use the original age in most cases.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Martins, the cap rate study that Altus submitted is there in written form. Mr. McCubbin didn't go through it in any detail at all, but would you like to enter your rebuttal evidence with respect to that study?
Yes, please.
Okay. And can you provide us with a short presentation?
Essentially, we feel that the way that Altus calculated the rebuttal without using actuals, but instead creating their own model to create the income and expenses that were used in order to create the cap rate, we feel that that's not a valid form of mapping out the cap rate. So as far as the analysis, we have essentially a disagreement on the basis of cap rate, which is why our cap rates are so very, very different.
Okay. Mr. McCubbin, do you have any questions?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Penner?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martins, will your rebuttal evidence apply to the entire docket?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Martins, would you like to do summation for this property?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCubbin?
I'm good, thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude item number 1. So moving along to item number 3 on our agenda. This is file number 24-1349, 20 Morrow Avenue. Ms. Assessor, when you're ready, please.
This is roll number 080024005000, 20 Morrow Avenue. The assessed value is $5,989,000. The classification is 20, residential 2, and liability is T for taxable. This is an apartment with 1 building on the property, 2 stories. It was built in 1969. There are 48 suites and 48 outdoor parking spots. On page 3, we have the income summary. We have 12 one-bedroom units, 36 two-bedroom units, which gives us our 48 units. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,171.40. That gives us a gross potential rent of $674,726. We've applied 3.6% for the vacancy. We've applied 51.2% for the expense rate, which gives us a net operating income of $317,413. To that, we've applied a capitalization rate of 5.3%, giving us our estimated market value rounded at $5,989,000. Going through, we have our comparables, we have our cap rate. And on page 8, we start with an overhead map showing where this is. It's on Morrow, the second building off of St. Anne's Road. There's some advertisement pictures for the property. There's a permit from, this one was in 2023 for approximately $70,000 of work. And on page 12, we have the income and expense mailer. And that goes through to page 18. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. McCubbin, questions for the assessor?
Not at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Penner, questions for the assessor?
No questions for me, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Just to confirm, this assessment, was it all model generated?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and with regards to the vacancy rate, 3.6%, the building permit indicates that there was repairs due to a fire. So I'm just wondering if how that is dealt with, you know, if there's a fire and there's any vacancy, is there anything on record in regards to that on page 11?
We usually don't let short-term vacancies that would potentially, the loss would potentially be covered through insurance. We don't have that impact the model vacancy, simply because we don't have, we don't apply a zero vacancy for properties that in actuality have zero vacancy and a long waiting list. So even if there was a vacancy, it would be for, sometimes the vacancy is only over a weekend, if that much. And we don't apply a zero vacancy to any of those properties. We adjust the vacancy for purposes of lower quality buildings and for buildings that have chronic vacancy issues. So if a building has consistent vacancy, then we adjust the vacancy. But it's because its vacancy can fluctuate so wildly that we simply apply the model vacancy across the board, with the exception of chronic vacancy or like a bigger problem than that. So having a small fire, which was probably covered through insurance, that's not something that we let impact the value.
Okay, thank you very much. That's my only question.
Thank you. And I have no questions, Ms. Martins. So Mr. McCubbin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 20 Marl Avenue, file number 24-1349. On page 2, the 2025 realty assessment is $5,989,000. We're requesting that the assessment be lowered to $5,064,000 even. And I'm not going to go through the description of the property. The assessor did a good job pointing out location in the photos. I'll go directly to, I'll go right to the income approach to value, which is found on page 13. Again, we're disputing the assessor's market gross rents of $674, and we're applying potential market gross rent of $633.41, and that's based on the actual stabilized income of the subject property. We're applying a vacancy allowance of 6.8%, and we also stabilized that somewhat, and you'll see that in the spreadsheet. For the purposes of this report, we're disputing the assessor's expense allowance of 333,023. We are applying an expense allowance of slightly higher of $334,356 based on the actual stabilized expenses, but we're fairly close. In regards to capitalization rate, the assessor is applying the model applied a capitalization rate of 5.3%, and we're using a capitalization rate of 5.75% for this property. On page 15, you can see the resulting market value from that little discussion in the inputs in the pro forma. We arrive at a value of $5,064,000 rounded. And if you go to the income approach summary, which is on the following page, you can see a breakdown. Okay, first of all, you can see the potential market gross rents is recorded 2020, 21, 22. And there was a dip there in 2021. It seems like a substantial dip. And then in 2022, it came back up to 630. It was 604, then 388, I believe, and then 630. And the average is 541. We've looked at 630 because they're going to consistently be getting that from now on, we suspect. But previously, they did have, if you look at the vacancy percent for the years, you can see they were at 5.57, 5.9, 6.1. It's the average. We're using 6.8, I believe. So we're stabilizing it at that. Yeah, and with respect to the fire, as Ms. Martin said, we generally we wouldn't expect an adjustment for a minor incident like that, unless, yeah, the building is inoperable or something like that. Nevertheless, on page 17, you can see also. Sorry, did I go to the bottom of page 16? You'll see the indicated market value there, Madam Chair, at the bottom of page 16 on the bottom line of that table. And you see the inputs with respect to the capitalization rates and the net operating income from my discussion. On page 17, you can see the stabilization of the R&M that we did. And on page 18, our summaries, we respectfully request the Board of Revision to reduce the 2025 realty assessment for the subject property from $5,989,000 to $5,064,000. Thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Martins, questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Penner, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if you could speak to the cause of the vacancy, since it's a little bit higher than what we are maybe used to seeing.
Right. That's a good question. I think when a building is old and tired and it needs fixing up a little bit, there's certain demographic that shy away from stuff if it's not, properly kept up. And so that's probably was the cause of the vacancy. I don't think it was anything else. But the picture it shows well from Ms. Martin's presentation. So they picked up. They've probably retrofitted quite a few suites. I'm just going on. I don't know for sure, but that could be one of the things. And so now the vacancy is tightening up. That would be a logical explanation for me. The fire wouldn't have anything to do with that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
Just if you can speak a little bit more to why you are requesting a 5.75% cap rate for this property.
Okay, fair enough. Now, again, this property was constructed in 1969, the original age, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to page 14 of my brief, you will see that properties that were built from 1946 to 1969, Altus 2025 good location was 5.75 to 6.5, right? We're using 5.75, the lowest in that band there. And I suspect this has a lot to do with the location too of the property. There are properties in this data set that are in way more better location. Not that this is a bad location, but they're better locations. It's a good question. It's in there. It's in that band.
Okay, thank you very much. That's my only question. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. Mr. McCubbin, I have a question about the R&M. I'm looking specifically at your page 16. And when there was low rental income, I had expected maybe, well, I'm not sure what I expected, but I'm seeing a fluctuation in that R&M line. 143 down to 36, up to 99, and then 92 is fairly, or the average is 92. Like, what's happening in this R&M? Is it possible there's some capital in there? Like, and I see that you did stabilize.
Yeah. And without speaking to those items, specifically with the management company, which I haven't, I would suspect that they're starting to throw money into the building. They're starting to get it back up, and it's probably going into the suites. It doesn't happen in 1 year.
I'm looking at your page. I'm also looking at your page 17, wondering if that sheds some light on it.
Right. Well, you can see, for example, I guess flooring replacement, right? 21,000 in 2018. You can see they started and 25 in 2020, right? And 2021 it was only 609. So did a lot of flooring back then, right? And the year average is 12,520, right? We stabilize at 12,520. We're not going to go to the higher amounts because, you know, they're probably doing a lot of work on flooring in those years. What else can we look at here? That's a big number that's fluctuating. When you look at painting too, like in 2018, you see how much they spent on that, 22,375. Then it dropped down in 2019 to 10, so virtually by half. Then it went back up again a little higher to 23. And then the next 2021, it was only 4,000. And then it went up to 22. So we stabilized at 16,556.
So
because we're not going to go to high number, stabilize, because you know, they're throwing a lot more than is, you know, than you would contemplate in a year. Maybe it's catch up, I'm not sure, but they're trying to catch up with the maintenance of the thing. But we figure that with respect to that category, painting, an appropriate number stabilized to 16,000, not 4,000, not 22,000, and not 10,000. You know, it's not, stabilization is not generally an average. You also have to look to the numbers and sort of make a conscious decision, or, you know, rational decision. It's not always, it's not, actually, it shouldn't really be average.
But right? In the case of R&M, you do use an average, a 5-year average.
You stabilize within that, right? You're already stabilizing, right? So you're taking care of all of that, right? Within that. So so when you come out with an average, it's from the stabilization.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I see that in some cases you used, I can't really tell actually.
Which category are you
looking at? I'm looking at page 17 still.
Right.
And I'm seeing your averages.
Right.
And then I see your stabilization.
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
So what I can, I see what you're seeing there. So, well, that's exactly what I'm getting at. 5-year average. When you look at a 5-year average, it's sort of like an average. When you're stabilizing, you have to make a conscious effort to find out what's going on within that 5-year period with each item. So, for example, we used when you look at painting, like I just spoke about, right? You look at painting and the average is 16,556, right?
Right.
We stabilized less at 10,778.
Right.
We didn't go right to the average.
No, I see that.
Just, you know, that would be too high.
Yeah, I do see that.
So we dropped it down. We figured a stabilized amount, reasonable amount, is like $225 per suite.
But the big expenditure, like flooring replacement, you did just use an average.
And flooring replacement, we just used an average because that was usable. Yeah, you know, it made sense in a way, right? So you can flip back and forth, but generally, we could have used 12,600, or but it would have been close to the average.
Okay, and is your view $15.95 per suite a reasonable number given this type of property and its age? In your view?
Given this type of property and its age, given this property and its age,
like what would
this type of property be, that's an open question for me, but I don't know.
Okay.
Specifically, and I'm just not trying to be coy here, but specifically for this property, I think the stabilization is appropriate. Now, in the future, you may find different expense ratio in the next cycle for this property.
Yeah,
and ratio could be low or could be lower.
Yeah,
because a lot of the, you know.
And I don't want to belabor it, because in terms of total dollars, you're only $1,000 different from the assessor.
Right.
in
Yeah,
terms
no,
of
no, no, fair
actual.
enough. Yeah, no, but
It's
I'm just explaining how we came to our
yeah,
numbers. That's all.
yeah,
Like,
for
there's
sure.
a method behind the madness, so to
Yes, for
speak.
sure.
But then it's not exact science, as you can see.
No, I see. And the only reason it's really about the income, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
That's really where
The
the
house
issues are.
performing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I have no additional questions. It just struck me as kind of weirdly fluctuating there, the R&M.
Yeah, no, that's no, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have no additional questions. So Ms. Martin, I know you have your rebuttal evidence, so that will stand for this property as well. Would you like to do summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCubbin?
No, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, that will conclude item 3. Well, we'll move on to item number 5. This is file number 24-2745, 34 Morrow. And Mr. McCubbin, I'm confirming that this is an appeal for only the assessed value of the property.
Again, Madam Chair, if the others are not picked off, then yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, agent's property. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Martins.
This is roll number 080024010000, 34 Morrow Avenue. The assessed value is $6,481,000. The classification is 20. The liability status is T, taxable. This is an apartment with 1 building, 2 stories, built in 1968 with 51 suites and 48 outdoor parking spots. On page 3, we see that the suite mix has 27 1-bedroom and 24 2-bedroom. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,097.21, giving us a gross potential rent of $671,493, with a vacancy rate of 3.6% and an expense rate of 46.94%, giving us a net operating income of $343,467. To that, we've applied a capitalization rate of 5.3%, giving us an estimated market value rounded at $6,481,000. We have our rent comparables, our cap rate information, and then we have pictures starting on page 7. On page 10, we have a map and an overhead view so we can see where the location is. It's the 3rd building off of St. Anne's on Morrow Avenue. On page 11, we have the income and expense information through to page 13. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. McCubbin, questions for the assessor?
I have none, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anderson, questions for the assessor?
Yes, just in regards to the owner's statement of return that is filed at the end of your document, I'm wondering if you can point me to where the owner's net operating income is, what amount it is.
It looks like they've done very simply on page 11 that they've got their revenue up top and their expenses, and then at the bottom there is the $365,884.
Okay. And so comparing that to your net operating income, $343,467. Okay.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
It's within the range.
And what is the range? That would be my next question.
Well, I mean, it depends. If we were talking millions, there would be much more flexibility for what is within a range, but it's fairly similar.
Okay.
We don't, I don't look at the individual income and expense forms and then go and correct all of the assessments.
Right.
We have too many buildings in Winnipeg. It's prohibitive. It's not feasible to say that we should take all the income and expense forms and apply them to all the buildings. So the model seems to come fairly close in this case.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Penner, questions for the assessor?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either, Ms. Martins.
Thank you.
Mr. McCubbin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. 34 Morrow Avenue, file number 24-2745. The 2025 realty assessment is $6,481,000. We're requesting an assessment of $5,129,000. And if you can go to page 13 of my presentation, please, you can see we're disputing the city's market gross rents, $671,493. We're using $650,123 based on the actual stabilized income of the subject. We're also applying a vacancy rate of 7.4%. Expense, with respect to the expense allowance, we're disputing the assessor's expense allowance of $303,852. We're using a higher expense higher expense allowance of $320,460. And that's based on the stabilized expenses of the subject property. In regards to the cap rate on page 14, we're disputing the assessor's cap rate of 5.3%. We're using a cap rate of 6%. Bear with me for a second, please. %, yeah. So on page 15, in regards to what I've said with respect to our differences with potential income and expenses in the capitalization rate, our value is $5,129,000 rounded. And you can see that on page 16 of my presentation, on the bottom line, line 35 of that spreadsheet. You can see the value there, and you can see the imputed capitalization rate of 6% and the net operating income. Now, in regards to the repair and maintenance, the R&M for this property is located on page 17 of my report. So if you can go through that, we can see that I'll just touch on the higher numbers here. That will make a difference. Flooring replacement, again, seems to be a big one here. It started out in 2018 at $77.12, went up to $21,090 in 2019, and in 2020 it dropped down to $16,391. It's kind of stabilized there for 21. Same kind of amount, dropped a little bit. So I see it's stabilizing around that amount. So we use 15. The average is 15,222, and we're using the average in this case again, because it seemed to be stabilizing down around there for that. In regards to, let's pick another one here I can see. Plumbing, for example, when you look at plumbing, 2018, you can see $17,693 was spent, and it went up to $15,702 the following year. Then it jumped right up to $37,687. You know, and I guess there was some capital expenditures in there in that year too. If you look at, capital expense, that's why it went up that high. Yeah, and that's why it's in red. and then it went down to 24, and then it went down to 14,517 in 2022. So the average is 21,991, and we're using 15,971 as a stabilized amount for that amount for that. I think there's still work to be done on this building. Nevertheless, so that's the expense end of things. On page 18, in the summary, we respectfully request the board to reduce the 2025 realty assessment for the property from $6,481,000 to $5,129,000. And let me see if there's something I can pick out here in my INE. The cap rate is higher. I noticed that 6%. From 1946 to 1969, it's 6%. It's sort of right in the middle there. Not that high, actually. It's not that bad. It's at the end. This property is 1968. I do believe. Yeah, it's a 1968 building, so 6% is fair. And that's my presentation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Martins, questions for Mr. McCubbin?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anderson, questions?
Have you visited the building, Mr. McCubbin?
No, I've never visited this building, Madam Chair. No. Okay.
And in regards to the vacancy rate that you've applied, 7.4%. So, are you aware of any issues as to why it would have a high vacancy?
Again, I think it's the same sort of situation like I explained before with this one too. Like what's happening here, it seems like it's going through a period of restoration, right? Like the properties are all about the same age in this area. So they're going through, so they were down, now they're coming back up. And if you look at the vacancy percent on page 16,
yeah,
and you look at the years 2020, 21, 22, and then you look at the average 7.4. You know, the city's using 3.6. Like it's still experiencing vacancy as we go along, and it's experienced vacancy for quite a while too. You know, the higher vacancy. And again, I think it's just mainly because now it's getting fixed up, and so the vacancy, you'll see now next cycle, the vacancy will probably drop down to a normal vacancy rate. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay,
I have no
further
question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pinner, questions for the applicant?
My question was basically the same, so I will leave it be. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm looking at your cap rate, Mr. McCubbin. So I know this is a different property than previous, but it's right next door. It's 1 year difference in age. It's about the same number of suites. And by the pictures, it looks to have the same type of quality of finish. The last one you used a 5.75 cap. This is a 6. So right. I'm just curious. I don't see any comments in your table on page 14.
Right.
So can you speak to what would drive that extra 0.25% on your cap?
I would just be speculation on my part right now.
Sure.
Would you like to hear speculation, or
I'd like to hear your opinion.
Oh, my opinion, and again, it would just be speculation because I wouldn't know for sure. The only thing, what would make a difference in the cap rate, everything else being equal, and the properties are side by each, would probably be the extent of restoration in one at this point in time. But I don't know. That would be a I would speculate that. but I can't say that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And,
hard.
and
It's
I
hard.
mean, if you, and then to take that further, if both of these properties are on the market, and yeah, everything else is the same except for the condition of suites. Guess which one is going to get the higher cap rate?
Yeah, and I do note that on this one, the R&M per suite is higher.
Right.
So they are putting money into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But maybe it's not money to the point that the other one has been put into it. Like not, the ratio is not the same at this point in time. And again, I must come back to when you have two properties side by each, everything else is identical. The only difference is the condition, the interior condition of one. Of course, you're going to pay more money for the other one, because why would you pay the same for the one that's less desirable, in a sense that the suites are not good to go, and the majority of them are not fixed up, kind of. But I don't know if that's making sense.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, I have no additional questions. So, Ms. Martin, I'll note that your rebuttal evidence will apply for this matter also. And would you like to do summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCubbin, summation?
No, thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude item number 5. Our last item is number 6. This is file number 24-2841, 75A Morrow Avenue. And again, Mr. McCubbin, I'm just confirming that this is an appeal of the assessed value of the property.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Martins.
Okay, this is file number 24-2841, roll number 080021737700. The address is 75A Morrow Avenue. The assessed value is $6,486,000. Classification is 20, residential 2, and the liability status is grantable. This is an apartment. There are 2 buildings on the property with 3 stories. It was built in 1977. There are 48 suites and 48 outdoor parking spots. On page 3, we have the income value summary. For the suite mix, we have 8 one-bedroom, 7 two-bedroom, and 33 three-bedroom units, totaling 48 units. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,234.71. That gives us a gross potential rent of $711,193. To that, we have applied a 3.6% vacancy rate and a 51.28% expense rate. That gives us a net operating income of $334,019. To that, we have applied a 5.15% capitalization rate, giving it an estimated market value of $6,486,000. We have some rental comparables and our CMHC average apartment versus modeled rent spreadsheet, and the standard capitalization evidence. And on the page 11, we have a bit of a map just showing the location of where this is, and you can see the shape of the building, how it looks on the property. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. McCubbin, questions for the assessor?
I have none, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. This assessment, is it all model generated?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so the rents, this is a multi-resident building. The rents, are they, you provided the examples of the MHRC rents. So are they 80%? Are they based on 80%, or what's the percentage of the rent?
It's not based on that chart. It is based on the model. We use the chart to show that the model comes out to approximately 84.75% of the averages that we have of the combined average for the CMHC
Okay.
rents that are available.
Okay. And in regards to the cap rate, 5.15%, just wondering if there's any review of the cap rate, given that it is nonprofit housing?
No, there hasn't been. This is one of the ones that I have actually reviewed this property. I've inspected it. Not this year, but I inspected it a few years ago. And this one could probably use a little less aggressive cap rate on it, to be honest.
Okay. Okay, those are my only questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Penner, questions?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just writing madly, trying to take notes and think at the same time. I can't always do that. Okay, so Ms. Martins, do you remember approximately when you inspected? And can you speak to the condition, I guess?
Well, this one, I inspected it a few years ago. I can't remember exactly.
Not for this cycle though, right?
Not for this cycle. And when
Okay.
I did review it a few years ago, I did adjust the quality to a below average quality so that it is more reflective of the finishes and the general aspects of the building. So yeah, this is already treated as a below average building, which is why it's got the slightly higher expense rate and the slightly higher vacancy rate. Like some of the buildings we see a 3.6, some of the buildings we see a 2.6. This one is slightly higher because it's already being treated as a below average property. But at that time, we didn't have an override for the capitalization rate that would stay with the building year after year in the model.
Okay. Did you say something about the vacancy rate adjusted?
Well, it's part of the characteristics.
Okay.
And that's because the model generates and it's based on the characteristics of the property. And this property has been adjusted to be not an average property, which a lot of the properties are average, which is average. And this one is, it doesn't have the finishes on it. I don't believe I can't remember if there's any carpeting at all in any of the units. And the flooring isn't like a luxury flooring. The flooring is an easy, clean, inexpensive, like linoleum flooring. So it's below average.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. McCubbin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 75A Morrow Avenue, file number 24-2841. The current assessed value is $6,486,000. We're requesting that it be reduced to $5,584,000. Page 7, you can see some page on page 6 and page 7, you can see some photographs overhead of the subject property. And on page 7 in specific, that bird's eye view, you can see sort of a red dot in the middle of it. I believe that's where it's located. It was constructed in 1977. So going right to the income approach on page 13, the subject is best described as social housing and operates on rent geared income, RGI basis. Therefore, the income achieved by the property is not deemed to be market. So it's not at market value, the income. For the purposes of this report, we're accepting the assessor's market gross rents of $711,193. With respect to the vacancy allowance, we have consulted CMHC to determine an appropriate market vacancy for the subject at the reference date. Based on our review, we have applied a rate of 3.6%. In regards to the expense allowance, for the purposes of this report, we're disputing the assessor's expense allowance of $351,571. We're reducing that to $322,636 based on the actual stabilized expenses. So it's less. There's some information there in regards to capitalization rates for social housing on page 14. And what, description, subject property is social housing, basic finishes without landlord, air conditioning, low income tenancy, and then it goes on to talk about the low income tenancy on page 16. I'm not going to go through that. You can peruse that at your leisure. On page 18, we get to the capitalization rate, and we're disputing the assessor's capitalization rate of 5.15. I believe it's too low. And we're using a capitalization rate of 6.5%. And just to touch on that, why there's a big difference there. So this property was constructed in 1977. So if you go to page 18, you can see properties that are constructed in 1970 to 1989. Our good location capitalization rate span from 5.5 to 6.25%. So we're 0.25%. Sorry, we're 0.25. We're 25 basis points above our highest number there. And that's directly related to issues with this building, such as, condition, building amenities. It's a bare bones type structure. Bearing in mind is the cap rates that I referenced in the middle of the page on page 18. Those are this type of property wouldn't be in there. It would be the properties that are in way better condition. So you can make adjustments for that. So we've adjusted, suite mix and a bunch of stuff. But we've made an adjustment of 0.2 or 25 basis points above the 6.25 band there at the end for this property, and that's the reason for that. That's how we rationalize the capitalization rate. On page 19, the resulting market value is therefore $5,584,000 rounded. And on page 20, you can see the income summary. And you can see, what is it? Yeah, sorry, on page 20, you can see on line 35 of the spreadsheet, you can see the relative, you see the value of the property, cap rate, and the net operating income used. So in summary, we respectfully request the Board of Revision to reduce the 2025 realty assessment for the property located at 75A Morrow Avenue from $6,486,000 to $5,584,000. That's my presentation. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Ms. Martins, questions for Mr. McCubbin?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Penner?
No questions for me, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, and nor do I. So that will conclude item number 6. And before we wrap up the hearing, Mr. Mohan, are we good on the remaining items that we discussed?
Yes, Madam Chair, they all check out.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. McCubbin, and thank you, Ms. Martins. And we've now heard all items on the agenda, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.